I gotta be honest. I think the Mormons get a bad rep. I feel like as long as they've been around, they've been harassed just for existing, and I honestly can't see why. Sure, their door-to-door missionary work is annoying, and the polygamy is a bit odd, but they've since abandoned that one. Nowadays, they're just your standard run-of-the-mill religious folk, who also happen to wear a lot of suits. If you tear back the public perception of them and look at their history, that's actually a really interesting story they tell. So now, I want to do exactly that. Today, we're looking at the history of the Mormons. Also, even though they're officially called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, everyone knows them as Mormons, and it's shorter, so I'll refer to them as that. So the Mormon Church is a very young religion. It was founded in 1820 when their prophet Joseph Smith received a vision from God when he was 14 years old. Before this though, Joseph Smith was born in Vermont, and he grew up in upstate New York during the early 1800s. This area was a hotbed for what's called the Second Great Awakening in American history. This is a time period where basically a ton of new Protestant branches were sprouting up all over the region as the North adapted to capitalism and wage labor. These religions were made in response to the changes that were happening in the North. They felt the world was leaving God's original vision in favor of sin. The Mormons were different from these groups though, because while most of these new guys wanted to interpret the Bible differently, the Mormons took it one step further and added several new additions to the biblical canon. They're probably the most famous religion to come out of the Second Great Awakening because of that. Anyway, now that I got the historical context out of the way, let's meet the prophet. As mentioned earlier, Joseph Smith lived in upstate New York during the early 1800s. He was a very religiously literate person, and he studied the Bible very closely. He received his revelation when he was walking through the woods and knelt down to pray. He asked God to show him which church was the true church he envisioned. God responded, none of them, and at that moment, God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared before Joseph Smith. They told him that humanity had abandoned what God envisioned long ago, and now Joseph was tasked with bringing humanity back to the good Christian way. One might wonder, why did God choose a 14-year-old for this kind of job? Well, according to Smith, God entrusted this 14-year-old because he hadn't yet been corrupted by the sinful philosophies of the modern world. Smith left that encounter in the woods, knowing he had a higher purpose in life, but not knowing when or what he'd have to do to fulfill it. A few years later though, Smith would get his answer. While he was on another hike, Smith was visited yet again by a divine being. This time an angel visited Smith, but it wasn't God's usual messenger, Gabriel. No, this was a new guy, Moroni. Moroni is an angel from America, and he gave Joseph Smith golden tablets. Joseph took these tablets back to his house and translated them from a language called Reformed Egyptian into English, and that translation would go on to become the Book of Mormon. This book tells the story of Native American ancestors who came from Israel. They traveled to America and started a civilization there, and that civilization would have a greater purpose in God's plan. There were 11 other people around Smith who saw these tablets, but only those 11 and Smith were allowed to see them because Moroni ordered Smith not to show anyone unless he or God allowed it. And over the course of 21 months, Smith translated all the plates and returned them to Moroni at the same hill where they met. Later on in his life, Joseph Smith, yet another famous biblical figure, John the Baptist. John the Baptist commissioned Joseph, alongside a few others, to continue the priesthood of Aaron. This priesthood is wicked old. It was started by Moses' brother Aaron after the exodus from Egypt. Joseph Smith organized this group into the Quorum of 12, modeled after Jesus' 12, hopefully without the traitor though. Smith declared himself head prophet because he received the original revelation. A portion of the 12 decided to travel around Europe and the US to convert people to the Mormon faith, with a particular focus on converting Native Americans as they were seen as descended from the lost tribes of Israel. Meanwhile, the rest, including Smith, stayed in the States to try and locate a spot for the New Jerusalem in America. They eventually settled on Missouri being the New Jerusalem. The Mormons were not well liked by the people of Missouri. The Missourians, Missourites? Miserable people? They hated Mormons a lot. So much so that fighting broke out and a few people died. Their hatred prompted one of Smith's advisors to make a speech about the War of Extermination. In this speech, he declared that if the Mormons were attacked, they would retaliate against their attackers. This speech only infuriated the Missourians more, and even more hate crimes ensued by non-Mormon vigilantes killing Mormons. This got so bad that the Missouri State Militia formed to stop the fighting. The Mormons thought this militia was coming to attack them though, so they struck first. The governor was outraged at this and ordered the militia to exterminate or drive them from the state. The militia quickly defeated the Mormons, and Smith was singled out as their leader. Joseph Smith was sentenced to hang, but he was freed by non-Mormon sympathizers and they escaped to Illinois. The Mormons set up a new headquarters in Nauvoo, Illinois. I should mention that during this time, they were still receiving some new revelations that expanded their religion. In Illinois, this is where the Mormons incorporated polygamy into their religion. The reason for this is due to a lot of deaths in Missouri, the Mormon women outnumbered the men, and because we all know how stellar equality was back then, women couldn't do much in society unless they were married. The Mormons asked God what they should do, and God instructed them to adopt polygamy. Yeah, that's right, one of the Mormons' most famous religion traditions, even if it isn't practiced by modern Mormons, wasn't even a part of their original revelation. Another aspect of their religion that was adopted in Illinois was the baptism of the dead. This practice is exactly what it sounds like. They baptize in the name of the dead, so that they, the dead, can live in the kingdom of God. While this practice was done in early Christianity, it has long since been faded out of the religion by modern churches, and the Mormons are some of the only Christians in the modern day who do this. The Mormons were afraid of discrimination following them to Illinois, so Joseph Smith set up the Nauvoo Legion to protect Mormons in their new home. Unfortunately though, discrimination did continue. Before it was because they were different, and some Americans probably thought they were blaspheming by adding stuff to the Bible. This time though, it was that, plus polygamy. Nothing too major happened, at least until the governor was shot by an unknown shooter. On the bright side, he lived. On the downside, he suspected and blamed the Mormons. He thought they were responsible because they were trying to get their own state independent of Illinois. The governor raised a militia and threatened to siege Nauvoo. Smith turned himself in on the condition that Nauvoo would not be destroyed. Smith and his brother Hiram, another one of the 12, were arrested and brought to prison. Before any trial could happen though, an angry mob stormed the prison looking for Joseph Smith. They shot through the prison door, injuring Joseph, which made him fall out of a window, which was several stories up. He died from fall damage. Meanwhile, his brother Hiram, he was found underneath the bed, and they shot and killed him. Joseph Smith became a martyr for the faith he created. Don't feel bad for Joseph Smith though. He would be rewarded in death. When he died, he was given an all-access pass to heaven, so he could sit right beside God and Jesus. Well, that's a very quick history of Joseph Smith's life and his revelations. I hope you enjoyed and learned some stuff about the Mormons. I wouldn't be shocked though if you still had some questions, like how'd they end up in Utah, or why do they always wear those funny suits? Well, I can answer one of those, and many other questions you might have in Part 2, History of the Mormons, Brigham Young. Also, shout out to my Mormon friend for proofreading my notes and the script. You're a king, my dude. Thank you for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more, and have a good one.